To first ever Belcastro Agency First Page Critique Party. We thought with everybody on lockdown and all the conferences and workshops canceled, we wanted to give authors the opportunity to be able to get their work reviewed, or at least hear somebody else's work reviewed, and help you continue to develop your craft while you're locked out at home. We'll start by introductions. I'll introduce myself, and then the rest of the agency will give a little bit about themselves. I'm Sharon Belcastro. I started in nonfiction, then moved on to adult thriller, mystery and suspense, and am currently building my list in YA. Just a little bit about my tastes. One of my favorite authors is Leigh Bardugo, Laini Taylor in the fantasy realm. Although I do like all YA genre, fantasy tends to be my favorite. In the contemporary genre, Mindy McGinnis, Jason Reynolds, Jeff Zentner. So I either like the darker fiction or laugh out loud rom-coms. And I will turn it over to Ella Marie.
Hi, Ella Marie Shue. I'm also, a founding agent with Sharon. She founded it first. I was an add-on with the Belcastro Agency. And I represent adult titles. Check it out and check out everybody's wish list on belcastroagency.com so you can go on there and read everything about us. And also there are the links to send us stories through Query Manager. And I really, really love thriller, mystery, suspense. Like that's my top. And the reason we decided to do this first page review is really to focus on what's important in that first page, because that is your time to grab attention for an agent, an editor, the reader. And that's starting sentence with a hook. That first page lets us know your setting, a genre appropriate tone that you should be using. It establishes the character's voice, and then if you've got an active protagonist in there. So that's what we look for. Caitlin?
Hey everyone, I'm Caitlin. I'm a literary agent with Belcastro and a freelance editor at K. Johnson Editorial. And I pretty much like middle grade YA, adult, the contemporary fantasy, historical, light sci-fi, all that fun stuff. But you can see everything on our site, and we're really excited to kind of dive into these new stuff. So thank you for entering. And Courtney.
Hi guys, I'm Courtney. I'm also an agent with Belcastro, like everybody else here. I represent YA and adult. I'm definitely into fantasy and sci-fi most of all. I'm definitely looking for contemporary and horror as well. And send me all your queer literature because I want all of the queer stories. And yeah, you can submit, like Caitlin and Ella said, on our Belcastro site to the query managers.
All right, so I will start with the first page. I will give my feedback and then I'll turn it over to everybody else to. So Erica rolled the saliva with her tongue, inhaled and spat, wiping her mouth with her gloved hand and drying her glove on her tunic. Had her older sisters seen her, she'd been belittled for such an act. Princesses do not spit, but her sisters weren't here, and foot soldiers cared little about propriety. She nested in a crevice next to them and watched her brothers, men-at-arms, hurry down the hillside. These skurras smell worse than. Baron, her brother, slid into the cranny alongside her. As soon as his breath was warm against her ear, she absorbed his buoyancy, and a smile crossed her face. He put her hand on her shoulder and pointed to the hillside. Look, there's a skurra across the way. See it? The light in the setting sun blinded her, but for the silhouette of an olive tree and the lone skurra that perched on its limb. The fiend, tall as a man, unfolded a featherless wing twice the size of its height. Talons clutched the branch, their golds of sunset. This was the first time she'd ever seen one, and she shuddered at the sight of its face. owl's eyes, a squat nose, and fangs which protruded from its human mouth. They're so ugly, how could anyone live around them, she asked. It's not as though Lord Geryon has a choice. And they're ruled by a phantom? Baron had never attested to his belief in the legend. Even now his nod was slight. Why? What does Skatata want with these vineyards? Revenge, Baron replied. The child disappeared, replaced by a sad jaw. Our grandfather fought here, Erica. Same enemy, same war. Then it's ours to end. She squinted and lifted her brow. Okay, so what I like about this first page is it's clear we're in a fantasy setting. The protagonist her purpose is certainly clear. She is out to end a war with her brother. She definitely is very tough and feisty. So I think it's a great intro. Some of the opportunities I see in this is, so we mentioned Skura in the first paragraph, but we don't yet know what they are, and we don't see that until below, so we'd probably hold off on using that reference to her brother's men-at-arms until we find out exactly what they are. I think some of the writing too tends to be a little bit too clever. So she absorbed his buoyancy. I'm not exactly sure what clever. I think rudimentary writing, direct writing is probably best in trying to get your point across. When she looks at the Skura in the tree, we see at first that she's blinded by the sun, but she can see the silhouette. Yet we go on to describe a bunch of the details. I'm not sure how she would actually see those if she can only see the dark silhouette of the Skura. And setting the identifying the setting here as a fantasy, and we see towards the bottom of the page we're in a vineyard. I think I'd like to see that maybe further up in the page, but definitely like that she has a very clear purpose and she's a very strong protagonist. Anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, and I agree with everything you said. And one other thing I noticed, there was a lot introduced in that one page. So multiple characters are mentioned, fantasy, Skira. That's a lot for one page for me. I would slow that down a bit and introduce them as you're going on in the story. I will say, you know, she does do a good job. She sets up, without her sisters being there, she does set up, you know, the relationship between the sisters, and that's interesting.
Anybody else want to add to that one?
Yeah, so I like the creature because I love seeing new kinds of creatures being created and giving us that in-depth thing. But I felt like that kind of should have been the focus of the first chapter. Like Ella said, a lot was happening. We could have focused on this is the moment she sees this creature instead of, you know, talking about foot soldiers and the stable and like all this different stuff. We needed a little bit more focus that grounded us at first. And I always have a problem when you just start with spit or like some body physical thing like that. Because like it's the first thing I'm thinking of when I open your book is spit now. It's not the person spitting, it's just spit. So and I would make it more purposeful. You can show that she's a typical lady by when she's standing next to her brother and he's pointing out the creature and she's like, they're so ugly, and then maybe she spits to the side to be like attributing it to that, her personality, but also a meaning behind it. Make your choices matter. Don't just have it there to be like, this is her sign, she's not ladylike, and she's going to explain to us now she's not ladylike. Have a purpose to that. But otherwise, like you definitely had the fantasy there immediately, and I like seeing the evolution of like a creature in it that is specific like that. We can tell what's different about it compared to other fantasy titles.
Us that she's not ladylike. Yeah, and definitely great job in showing us she's not ladylike versus telling us she's not ladylike. So certainly spitting for a girl definitely indicates she's a bit of a tomboy, which I think is great. Anybody else want to jump in there? All right, Ellen.
Okay, so I have a thriller here. Yay, that's what I like. 95,000 words. You're right at that upper level of that. And let's start. Let me put my glasses on. There will come a time when you believe everything is finished, yet that will be the beginning. Louis L'Amour. Somewhere in Kansas Territory, present day. Is this death, this feeling of weightlessness, the pitch darkness that surrounds me? Surely this is what it feels like when the soul leaves the body and floats away towards eternity. 23 years old and dead, what a shame. My eyes are open, yet unseeing. I close them. What happens next? Will I see the bright lights of heaven, or will I feel the heat from the fires of hell? Something sticky and wet oozes down my head, which, by the way, hurts like hell. I land with a thud. Where am I? I move my left hand and feel beneath me. There's water, cool, still water, all around me. Yet I didn't land with a splash, just a thud. Pain throbs on the other side of my head now. I open my eyes. A faint light from above pierces the darkness. Is it the light from St. Peter's gates? Yellow, steady, unblinking, unwavering, coming closer? A shadow is moving with the light. Death? I'm terrified yet curious. I'm not going to turn away, even though perhaps I should. I try to turn towards it, to face death. Sharp, piercing arrows of pain shoot out from inside my head. Blood is oozing out, still bleeding, still in pain. I'm still alive. The light moves toward me, a perfectly circular light, arising from the forehead of a young man. Death's angel? Why would angels need eyeglasses? Light is attached to a hat, which he pulls his head and bends toward me. Deep brown eyes filled with concern. Who are you? How did you get here? His voice is boyish, even though he's taller than me. Okay, so I thought there was a lot interesting in there. I really like the line, something sticky and wet oozes down my head, which, by the way, hurts like hell. I land with a thud. Where am I? I move my left hand and feel beneath me. There's water, cool, still water all around me, yet I didn't land with a splash. That's interesting because it makes you wonder, what's happening in that situation. There's a lot of reflection in there, which I think is okay. It says thriller. I don't know if this is, delving into spirituality or not, because you're talking a lot about heaven and hell. So I'm not sure if that's the direction this is taking. And I did also really like, the light, and then realizing it's another young man there that has found him. So as far as a thriller goes, I like the fact that you're starting on something happening. Usually there's a tiny bit of a lead up before the instance when it's happened. So that would be the only note. We might like to meet this character even just very briefly before he's left for dead, so we can get to know him and care about what happens to him. As far as the writing, I think there might have been a missing word in there. I'm not sure. That could have been me in my reading, but other than that, I would want to read the next page. Anyone else? Any more feedback on that one?
Yeah, I'll go. I mean, like you said, it was a lot of introspection, and I think like on its own, I mean, I'm not a thriller person. I don't know where this is going. So I mean, it's definitely subjective, but I liked this on its own. I'm not sure for like my own taste as a first page, it would have like grabbed me as much, just because it is so much introspection and we don't know who this person is, and they're on death floor, but we don't know what's happened. And to me, it kind of feels like waking up. That's kind of what this vibe is giving me. And yeah, like Ella Marie said, like, I think a little bit of a lead up would definitely help, just a little bit, so we can get to know who the person is.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Yeah, I definitely agree. It was a bit obscure to me. I'm pulled in by the character and we don't know who this guy even is yet. Kind of, you know, feeling for his predicament because I wasn't sure who he was. Anybody else?
Oh, that's pretty much what I was thinking. I think when we start with so many unknowns, it confuses the reader more than like because the character themselves is confusing us because they don't know what's going on. So now we don't know what's going on, and it's not in a active way. It's just kind of floating. So I think for me, again, we need a little bit more before this so we can have something concrete to lead us into the rest.
Right. Okay, who's next?
My turn. I have a middle grade sci-fi. So that's usually good for middle grade, maybe a little higher in the sci-fi realm, but depends. And here is the first page. The best dream I ever had was when I was 9 years old. I remember being at the beach, but that's not what made the dream so cool. What made it cool was that I was lifting the one and only Millennium Falcon out of the ocean. It was like that scene in Empire Strikes Back where Luke was trying to lift the X-Wing out of the swamp. Only I actually did it. I don't remember much more than that because who the heck really remembers anything about their dreams? The Millennium Falcon was enough. The worst dream I ever had was last night, and the night before that, and the night before that, and the night before that. Oh, and in biology class yesterday and during 7th grade lunch period the day before. I'm not even sure I can call it a dream anymore because sometimes I'm not even asleep. It's not a nightmare. That isn't what makes this dream bad. What makes it the absolute worst dream in history of dreams is nothing. The dream is a big pile of nothing. Me standing in nothing until a stupid door to nothing appears and does nothing. And I keep having the dream. I can't get rid of the dang thing. Now it started to follow me around during the day, jabbing me like an annoying Ewok with a spear. An Ewok that threatens to blow the roof off my rebel mission to save Dad's work. That can't happen. Nothing can distract me. I need to get this under control or I'll never make the deadline. My hand runs along painted brick as I slip out of my bedroom and inch down the hallway into our living, dining, kitchen room. I'm pretty sure Mom hasn't left for work yet, which isn't a good sign because she would skip a shift at the hospital. She wouldn't skip a shift at the hospital unless something was up. So for me, the first page is a lot of explanation. We're just we start off with a best dream we ever had, but then we go to the worst dream we ever had. So it doesn't really need to talk about the best dream. I get what we were going for there, but the scene should be about what's bothering him and what about it is bothering him. So right now we're just kind of like, here's this dream, and then here's this dream, and oh, this dream's about nothing, and oh, it's following me around. We don't know who he is. We don't know where he is. We don't really know the age. I mean, it gives you a little youthful feel, but there are Star Wars nerdy people like at every age. So it could be a lot older, like Ella here. So it didn't really give us enough to go on. It would be like, why should I care about this character right now? We all have bad dreams and we all have weird dreams. So I need something that actually identified who the character was and kind of let me get to know them outside of like what this dream thing was. Like maybe actually start the scene where it's following him or he wakes up in that biology class and it's there. Like why not actually start in the scene instead of be telling us about a past scene? Make it active. Don't fall into memories or anything.
And I feel like everybody, starts their story with dreams. So doing something a little different.
Yeah,
to grab our attention.
I love the nerdiness. I love the nerdiness, and I bet that gets used with the character a lot going forward. But right now, I don't know anything about him yet or what he's doing. So like, it's more about the Star Wars reference than anything right now. So I want to see person and then the nerdiness.
Right, and I agree with everything. Same thing. I was looking like the setting. I suppose he's I couldn't tell if he was waking up or is he, exactly where he is. Transplant him. Let us meet him or her. I don't know if it gave a name. And it did say something about Dad's work. So I would just let us get to know the character a little bit, and you could always introduce those dreams as you go along. Maybe he has problems daydreaming and can't concentrate or whatever, but you could always bring that in after you meet the character. But yeah, I like I'm a Star Wars fan. I like Star Wars references.
Yeah.
I like to know what their predicament is. Like, that's the first thing that grabs me is what is this character facing, which would make me want to root for them.
Yeah.
Courtney?
Yeah, I mean,
Yours?
what everyone said. I don't want to like harp on the same thing like over
Right.
Yeah, so the one that I have is a YA fantasy, and it's 74,000 words. It's a little lower than I tend to like to see YA fantasy and sci-fi. Usually like between 80 and 100,000 is more the right range, but that's not, 74 isn't too bad. So I look beyond and above the bust to the Tennessee mountains surrounding me, making me feel less than small and even a bit insignificant. I'm not sure where the tops of the mountains end and the sky begins. Lush pine trees painted and blended into the backdrop of Blackwood Holler. The wasps in my stomach have evolved into a million fire ants trying to gnaw their way through my intestines, while my knuckles strain and turn white against the straps of my duffel bag. I relax just a bit with each passing breath of the cool mountain air. But before I even turn around, a chorus of southern drawls screaming my name echoes in my ears. Different tones, octaves, and even one in sing-song. Slowly, so very slowly, and with a lump in my throat, I turn to see a gaggle of old ladies waving like crazy. I pick out Mama immediately, the tallest of the bunch, like the highest mountain peak behind me, towering above the others. Must be where I get my height from. Despite my shame, a smile spreads widely across my face as I meet the eyes of the tall, stoic granny I remember meeting only once before. I have her big, wide-set eyes, I realize, as she rushes toward me. Luckily, I got my dad's lips and not the super thin ones of my mama, and the sisters. I was hoping you'd remember I was coming, I smirk. I didn't think there'd be a lot of lifts in the middle of nowhere. Of course we remembered, Mama says, smiling wide. Well, come here, let me take a look at you. Mama opens her arms in front of her expectantly. I set my bags down and give her a big hug, breathing in the scent of honeysuckle and tobacco before she lets me go. And this is Opal, she says, pointing to the paler of the two sisters, and Wimpy, who nods with a smirk, tucking a strand of long black hair behind her ear. The only sister I see with any color left on the top of her head. Wasn't sure if you'd remember or not, she adds, beaming brighter than 100 sets of twinkling lights. So one thing I definitely like about this, like I like depictions of anxiety like a lot. And I like the fact that we are getting to like sit in that part of her head as we go along here. I wish that we got a little better of an idea about why she's feeling shame. That particular word like stood out to me because I definitely only got like streams of like nervousness, which makes sense if you're meeting a grandma that you haven't only seen like once in your life. You're like in an airport or, you know, getting picked up wherever she is. But yeah, that shame threw me a little bit because I wasn't sure like why you'd be feeling shame at a moment like this. I was a little thrown as well, just like having the little bits of, I got my dad's got my dad's lips, I got my mama's height, all that stuff. I feel like that's more reflection that could be done later on. Whereas like I'd really rather be completely like in her senses and like where she is and like why she's feeling nervous at the moment. And yeah, anybody else?
This is a fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So right now it feels a bit like a contemporary setting. I mean, we're meeting someone in Tennessee, looking at mountains and meeting their grandmother. So I didn't fully get the fantasy tone. And it did feel a bit young, but it could be on the young side of YA. And the protagonist did feel a bit passive. However, if it is dealing with an anxiety or stress issue, then that could ramp up, after the first page, and we want to introduce the anxiety. I thought the family was endearing. I liked the way they explained the family and the mountains and how they matched up, and I thought that was an endearing way to do that.
So I'm pretty sure I know this writer. I believe it's an urban fantasy, because the second I heard Tennessee, I was like, okay, so it's not pure fantasy.
No.
So I think it's going to build to the fantasy world. But yeah, if you're going to say it's fantasy, you have to make it fantasy. If it's like an urban fantasy or something, we can forgive you being in the real world at the front. I really love the family. I wanted more of that personality to come out, though, that like, if her family is here with Southern drawls and stuff like that, like, does she have the Southern drawl too? Or does she have more of a citywide thing? And then she can be like, well, thank God I didn't grow up here. Or like, give us, like, with her nervousness, give us the personality too. Because that was all, like, Courtney said it best, was that we want to be in her senses, not just in, like, her movements. So that was the thing missing for me. But, like, I'm cheating because I know the concept of the book. But I do like it. I know it's coming, so I'll be quiet now.
And I didn't read, and for these 1 pages, I did not even read the query letter. So I'm going in blind to these. So I'm going just on what you present in the 1 page.
Yeah, I felt like we were going to get something Southern Gothic. So it's kind of drawn in.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I didn't get fantasy, but I got kind of a Southern Gothic feel to that one, which would be awesome if it was.
You're up, Sharon, I think.
Anything else on that one? I keep freezing up here, so I'm not sure if everybody's freezing at the same time or. Okay, I think it's back to me. I'm not sure exactly what this one is because I didn't really look at the queries at all. I'm just going straight from first pages to see if we get a good sense of the setting without knowing what it is. So the mid-morning sun streams in through the window behind me, finding me, as it often does, at the Tower of Sorcery. Slowly, I withdraw a sprig of lavender from a canister and crumble it into a vial before me, wrinkling my nose at the smell it releases. I murmur a familiar incantation, feeling energy gently drained from my body as the words roll lyrically off my tongue. The vial's contents begin to shine with a gentle glow, indicating the spell's powers have been absorbed, and I nod in satisfaction. I deftly seal the vial with wax and add it to the row of identical ones lined across the table. I straighten my back, twisting from side to side to stretch out muscles that had grown tight while I sat working. Grabbing the apple I had brought to replace the energy I knew I would be using, I moved to the window, hoping to enjoy the sun's warmth more fully. Below me, the valley we reside in stretches, the arrival of spring, an explosion of color and warmth, winning the war against the gold gray that has lasted for what feels like an eternity. My eyes quickly skim over the familiar buildings of the city below, past the farms and crops encircling to the wall, guarding our kingdom. I bite into my apple and let my mind wander, following habitually into musings about the world outside. Many generations have passed since my ancestors first settled here, feeling persecution, and in that time, few have been allowed to leave our self-imposed exile. Footsteps move across the floor overhead, pulling me from my musings, and I look toward the stairs descending from the room above. Okay, so what I like about this is it's clearly fantasy. It's clearly a sorcerer we're dealing with here. And we are tied. I think what I'm missing again is who is this person telling us this story? Why is he replacing the energy he knew he would be using? So if he's a sorcerer and he is sitting at this workbench in the Tower of Sorcery day after day after day, what is different in this particular day? Is there a special reason that he's sitting here on this day? So we don't actually know who he happens to be in at this particular time. Anybody else want to jump in there?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So the thing that caught my attention, one of my pet peeves, especially with like fantasy, is when characters start thinking about things that they know already about their world, just like out of the blue. So like he said, you know, he bit an apple and, you know, disappeared into his musings and was thinking about how I think his family moved there like generations ago. And like for me, that tends to like take me out of whatever scene you've put me in. I much prefer to get an idea of what the fantasy world is like through senses and through what's different about what's going on right now. So if somebody's like familiar with their world, it's very odd for them to sit there and think about what their world is like for the most part.
Exactly.
Yeah, Courtney took exactly what I was going to say, is that don't like fall into telling us about things. We want to stay in this moment, not in other moments. Like, we can find out about his family through a different way. And I'm sorry if I made weird faces. My cat took her into a cup and got stuck. I was trying to get the cup off her face. I'm sorry.
A cup got stuck on your cat's face? Is that what you said?
Yeah, she put her face in here because there's water in here. Yeah.
I put my cat outside, so she wouldn't
lock the door if I do that, and then it's loud and you hear it on the video, so they might. But yeah, so just try to stay in the now, and then what that person's doing right now. We want to be experiencing the story. We don't want pieces of the story told at us.
Yeah, we don't want the mundane. Like, so if this is just another day in the life of this sorcerer, it's not that exciting, but you know, we need an inciting incident. Like, what's different about this particular day and this particular time in his, you know, his work area. I'm sorry,
And then, no, that's okay. Yeah, absolutely everything that you said. And then the one thing that, so I really like a good first sentence, like we talked about at the beginning, and I can't remember the rest of it, but the sun streaming in through a window, or that's really used a lot. So, but I can't remember the rest of the sentence, and maybe the rest of the sentence was great, and you just get rid of that sun streaming part. But just that, like, try not to use something that you see, and you know, I would etch that part right out of there. But it's definitely clearly fantasy, so.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else? I'm up. Glasses back on.